This was a random project that just happened many years ago, and it's just I had this idea that, you know, I quite like snowdrops in the spring, you know, one of the first flowers that appear, and I just suddenly thought I could emulate that with LEDs. And I just scribbled the design out, and I just pretty much went straight to a few prototypes and then had a batch of circuit boards manufactured because I was already going to be getting a batch of other boards manufactured, so I just threw this into the batch. And then they arrived, and I decanted them. I put them into a bag for some reason, the circuit boards, and then misplaced them, and that was that. I just couldn't find these circuit boards. So they turned up again recently, and what I've decided to do, I've put this printed circuit board file up on my website along with others, so you guys can just download them if you want, and the viewer that's also linked there. And I'll put a link down below in the description. And it means that you can just make a batch of these if you want, and yeah, that's just an easy way to do it. It's just a little handy little project. So here's what it is. It's basically a ring of green LEDs which acts as the shoots and the leaves at the ground, and then it's stems, wire stems, with big white LEDs. And this is one application I do use cold white LEDs because they match the colour of the snowdrops. And the idea is that they come up on the end of the wires and then they droop over, and it looks like actual snowdrops because it is roughly the same size as a snowdrop. So we start off by taking the LEDs, the white LEDs, and we'll make the stems up first with the LEDs in the end. So I like to stick the LED in a vise or the helping hands here. Or if you're making a huge quantity, you can actually drill holes in a bit of wood and actually push them into it. But I'm going to crop those down to about 6mm, which is roughly 1/4 of an inch. And note the polarity, I'm keeping the negative to the left here. And you get a couple of bits of wire. In this case I'm not using red and black, although it's positive and negative. I'm actually going to use brown and green because it seems a nicer, sort of more natural organic colour. So I'm going to use green as the negative, and I'm going to strip roughly 6mm off the end of each of these wires. And I'm going to tin them. So I'm going to tin the wires and the LEDs. So I'll start off tinning the LED leads, just a wee bit of solder on each of those leads, and then onto the ends of the wires. Then I'm going to carefully hold the wires parallel to the LED leads. This is where you could use a touch of flux if you wanted for extra super mating of solder. And I'm just going to put them absolutely parallel and then just reflow that solder. And hold them very still because it takes a while for the joints to cool down again. So that's the negative done. Now comes the brown positive lead. Once again holding it parallel, just touching the side of the LED lead and then just flowing the solder so that they both fuse together. And pause, and that's it. So that's one of the snowdrops made, and what I'm going to do now, optional, you could use a touch of glue to cover these or something. I'm going to use a bit of heat shrink sleeving. So I've cut some short lengths, about 10mm, 3/8 of an inch, of 1.6mm. Not sure what that would equate to in imperial measurements. And I'm going to slip it on from the other end, slide it up over those soldered connections, and then use the heat pen, the little heat gun, to just heat those and shrink that on, just for neatness and to stop them from shorting out. Excellent, job done. I don't really need their helping hands now. I'll just tuck them out the way. So to save time, I have made the other 6 of these because there are 6. I've made them up in advance. Oh, I should actually finish that one, shouldn't I? To finish it, pull the leads down straight, taking care not to put too much pressure on the LED end, and crop them the same length. And strip approximately 1/4 of an inch, 6mm again. Taking care not to hold the wire and not put the strain in the LED in case you pull the leads off the LED. Easily done. Right, so that's that bit done. Now this actually, all this circuit board has, it's got 4 resistors labelled A, B, C and D. And Each resistor is in series with 3 LEDs. It's designed to operate off 12 volts. So these LED positions are marked AAA, and they're 3 LEDs in series with resistor A, and the same BBB, resistor B, and the same for the 2 clusters of LEDs that are down the middle, which are actually going to be the stems. So the resistors I've chosen are 220 ohm, and rather than use the fancy bending tool, I'm just going to do what most of you guys will do, and just grab the resistor in the middle and just fold the leads down, and then just mush it into the circuit board. Professional. Some people will say, oh no, you can't do that. It stresses the components if you do that. They're supposed to be supported by little long-nosed pliers and things like that, and carefully shaped. But I've never actually had a resistor fail due to stresses like that, even long-term operation. But I do use the component forming tool for my professional products, just because it produces a neat result. And everything just looks sort of well aligned, which is always a good result. So that's the resistors in, and I'm just going to solder them right now, in fact. So I'm going to place it down to hold them in place. Grab some solder. I'll just use a fresh bit here. And just solder one lead of each of those resistors. And as always with soldering, you apply the soldering iron to both the lead and the pad at the same time, and then just flow some solder in. And as others have mentioned, I mean, that's the official way of doing it. Sometimes it helps just to push that solder into the soldering iron so that you get a wee pool of wet solder, which mates the heat onto the pads quite well. So I'm just going to check that, and they're all sitting nice and flush. They're looking good. So I'm going to solder the other pads. As I've said before, the only way you're going to learn how to solder is just to make stuff. Even if it just means getting circuit boards and desoldering components, or trying to desolder, or flowing the solder joints, a bit more solder into them, just playing with the soldering iron. It's the only way you get the feel of it. There is just this natural feel you get when you're soldering. And you'll know it when you get it. That sounds sort of like weird and hippie-ish. So I'm going to crop those leads now, using the posh Xuron snips, because they produce a really nice flat, non-pointy lead, which is what they're designed to do. The American-made Xuron snips, which is nice as well. Yeah, it's odd. You're used to feeling sharp component leads when you do that, but when you've used these cropping tools, the Xuron cutters, it just feels soft in the top for some reason. It feels domed, it feels flat. It's quite impressive. So I'm going to start by putting the green LEDs round, and these are actually green LEDs. They're diffused, but they're actually got green chips inside them. These came from a random eBay seller, which means they're not 100% great. You never know what you're getting from China, so I'm just going to solder these one at a time. I'm just going to solder one lead initially, and then check them for alignment. Although you can usually feel when they're sitting flush, but also if you solder one lead at a time and then move on to the next one, then it's also got the advantage of letting the LED cool down a bit. And actually, that one has sat at a funny angle, so I'm just going to reflow that and sit it down, and that's fine. In goes the next one, positive lead into the positive position. I should actually remove the wire strippers off the top of my soldering iron cable. That would make it just that little bit easier. So push that LED in, and solder one of the leads. People always comment about how I hold the circuit board and the component and the solder all in one hand. It's just one of these things that happens. If you solder a lot, it will happen with you as well. You'll suddenly find that you're doing that naturally. It's what happens. Your hands are one of the most versatile tools about. So that's 3 of the LEDs with one lead soldered. It goes together quite quickly, this. It's quite nice. And the reason I decided to make it operate at 12 volts, in hindsight these days, maybe 5 volts would have been a nice option. So again, you could run it off a USB power supply. But at the time, it was to keep the component count low. By using 12 volts, I could use just one resistor per 3 LEDs with 5 volts, you'd pretty much need a resistor per LED unless you started hooking them up in parallel, which is never necessarily a good thing. Sometimes the LED forward voltage doesn't quite match and you end up with different intensities, which is not really great. With the LEDs wired in series groups like this on 12 volts, it gives consistent intensity throughout because the same current is pretty much travelling through every LED. Right, so that's one lead of all those soldered, and I'll just check they're all aligned. Because they're diffused, it's not that critical because all they're doing is providing a wee splash of light at the bottom of the ornament. Wipe that lead off, the lead off the soldering, and then solder the remaining connections since they're just ready to be soldered now. Quite a nice little circuit board to make. Everything's well spaced out, and again, as with most of my circuit boards, it is deliberately single-sided just because it doesn't need to be double-sided. And it makes it much easier to change components as well, should you ever decide to swap some LEDs out, particularly if you get duff LEDs in any way. So that's all the green LEDs soldered. I'm going to crop them flush. Okay, next thing that's going on is the actual snowdrops, and we'll be twisting and shaping these afterwards. So the circuit board is marked with plus symbols and minus symbols for polarity. So with these ones I'll probably just solder both at once because they're basically, you know, they're flexible wires, and I'm not too worried about heat damage because it's unlikely to happen because they're just wires. About the worst thing you could do here is just get the polarity wrong, and if that's the case, just desolder them and turn them round. At this point it looks a bit sort of gangly because the LEDs are all standing on their own. We'll be twisting leads together afterwards to make it look sort of more branchish and sort of more organic, shall we say. The LEDs don't have to be white. I made a version up with psychedelic colours. It was reds, oranges and yellows at the end, and then blue LEDs in the base instead of the sort of green ones, and it looked quite nice. It looked quite sort of random and strange. If you hear loud burbling noises, it's my stomach. It's just decided to protest tonight. I'm trying to think, have I eaten anything? Yes, I have eaten. That's alright. Sometimes I forget to. I get so engrossed in projects I forget to eat. And that happens. But I have eaten tonight, particularly it's Saturday actually today, and well, it was. It's now into Sunday. And as always, I tend to have a sort of predictable food, shall we say. I always have a sort of like a special fried rice, just a sort of frozen container of it that I just microwave. Yeah, posh. Bachelor life. Eaten straight from the microwave tray as well. Super posh. With a spoon. So definitely no gourmet class going on there. This is all going together very quickly. I've got 2 more snowdrops to go in. Looks alright as it stands, just with them just randomly pointing in different directions, but we'll sort of twist them together to make them look more like a sort of snowdrop plant actually would look like. If you know what snowdrops look like. I'm not sure how common they are around the world. Certainly in the UK, certainly here in the Isle of Man, it's the first sign of spring, crocuses and snowdrops. Oh, and of course Glasgow. Queen's Park comes to mind in Glasgow. Otherwise known as Death Park. It just looks fantastic in the spring when they all start appearing. And in goes the last snowdrop. Normally I try and keep these videos relatively short, but it's impossible when you get engrossed in a project. You don't realise just how much time actually flies while you're making it. Right, that's that. So let's, before I twist these together, actually no, let's twist them now. So I'm going to actually start twisting these leads, but don't grab the LED and twist it round, because although it's tempting to do that, you can actually snap the leads off the LED. So just grab it below the LED by the wires themselves and just put a few twists in it just to give the sort of wire a bit of form and rigidity and keep it together. In the past, I have to admit, I probably have just grabbed the LEDs, and yeah, just occasionally one does snap the leads off the bottom of the LED if you're not careful. I would demonstrate that you can twist it by the LED with modest risk, but that, knowing my luck, the LED will just pop off the wires. I'll be left holding a small resin blob with the two solder joints and the two wires attached into it. Right, that's the last snowdrop bulb. It's not really a bulb, is it? I mean, they grow from bulbs, the snowdrops. But and I guess we could just kind of like, I'm not really sure, interleave these together or twist them together in some way. Can't remember how I did the original. I suppose really just twist that to there and that to there, and just generally twist them into some sort of general mass. Yeah, this is I didn't really think this bit out, did I? That's alright. It's organic, as they say in the art industry. That's not looking too bad actually for that, for my messy twisting. There probably is some really handy pattern that you could just pleat them in. Right, that's pretty much enough before I do any more damage. Let's get the power leads. Now this is where I actually included a small hole for the power leads, and technically speaking I could bring the cables underneath and then solder them down in the top, but I think it would be quite neat to keep them out of sight by putting those leads through like that and just soldering them onto the pads underneath instead. So I'm going to strip a shorter length this time. I'm going to strip about 3mm, which is about 1/8 of an inch, because all they're doing is soldering onto the pads underneath. I'm going to twist them together. I was actually trying to pleat the LEDs, and there probably is an easy way. I actually can never remember how to pleat these things. If I do it, I used to pleat wires a lot, particularly in complex props. I'd end up, to keep the wiring looms really neat, I'd just pleat bunches of them together. But I just can never remember how to do it until I've actually played about a bit and refreshed my mind, so to speak. So these are marked clearly negative and positive underneath the pads, and it's the big round pads. Keep those wires out of the way whilst I put some solder on the pads, so I'm going to flow some solder onto them. Negative and positive, and then I'm going to take the negative wire and just splat it onto the side. I'm going to reflow it. Let that cool. And then the positive the same. Looks pretty good. Pull those wires back through and then strip. About, well, I'm going to connect this to the bench power supply, so let's strip about 1/2 inch, which is about 12.5mm. Oh, I've actually done it somewhat more, I think, but that's alright. Well, I should give it a test now, shouldn't I? Well, here's the other thing. I put 3 holes in the bottom, which are 4mm diameter, for these little plastic pillars. So that could let you then screw it down onto a surface, or just use it as feet, as I'm going to use in this instance. And I'm just going to test this now. So let's get the bench power supply on. Get the soldering iron off for a piece here, because it buzzes a wee bit. Bench power supply, set it to 12 volts. Oop, bit overzealous, a wee bit too high, but that's okay, it doesn't really matter. Negative to negative, positive to positive. And there's the green base and the white flowers. And what I'm going to do now is I'm simply going to shape these so they actually droop down like actual snowdrops would. And that is pretty much it. It's looking quite nice. I definitely could have done with pleating those wires together in a more stylish manner, but it's not bad. They can be shuffled as desired. And that does actually look like a sort of electronic emulation of the snowdrop plant. So I'm just going to change the lighting a little bit just so you can actually see what that looks like. And here we have it, and I have to say the light sources always swamp the camera out a bit, but it's basically creating a pool of light around it, like a little table lamp really, but with the bright green shining up against the branches and then the whites just sort of splashing light down. It's actually quite nice. It really does look quite sort of plant-like in a sort of electronic way. So yes, so as I say, the files for this are online, and I'll put a link in the description down below where you can actually go and find the file to make this circuit board yourself. But yes, it looks good, and it also looks good in other colours, and the current consumption is only about 15 milliamps per circuit. There's 4 circuits, it's about 60 milliamps at 12 volts, so you know it doesn't really draw that much power either. It's a good little effect, it's very nice. I was trying to work out how I'd pleated these, and I found the original prototype, and actually it's from 2010, I didn't realise it was that long ago. But it's very clear that there was no fancy pleating involved, it's just twisting a big clump. So, well, right, okay, that's how it goes. Grab them up here and twist the circuit board into a big clump. There, that was easy. That looks pretty good, I have to say. And, yeah, just shape them down in a sort of droopy style after that. That was easy, that was definitely a lot easier than any sort of fancy pleating. Yeah, that looks much better, doesn't it? That actually looks quite neat, the way it's just twisted round like that, like a sort of big chunky stem. Okay, right, so yep, the prototype, actually there's some other differences. The resistors are different. I've shuffled them about for some odd reason. I wonder why I did that. Probably just for ease of sort of layout, and just to keep as much clearance and space as possible. Yep, good result. Yep, good little light, I like these. And I found the other prototype too, the coloured one. And I've also realised that instead of actually soldering onto LEDs, you could use those tiny little DuPont or the XH type connectors, and you could then just plug LEDs in as you desired. So that's actually quite a nice idea as well. You could also put little wire tails in the connectors and put them into the circuit board as well for the ones at the base, so you could just chop and change LEDs as you desired. It opens up other possibilities, but yeah, the green and white one is the most natural in this, well, as natural as an electronic snowdrop gets, but this one's got red, orange and yellow LEDs, and it's got the blue LEDs pointing up, which kind of swamp the red, orange, yellow a little bit, but visually, while the camera might be being swamped by that, to me it looks quite a bright and sort of weird and psychedelic colour. But I do have to say, I prefer the original snowdrop colour. They're both good though, they're both very nice. Nice little ornaments, just to stick in a corner of a room just for a splash of light with some sort of form to it. Yeah, they're definitely a neat little project.